They will never tell it my way. Not in their books, not in their monuments, and certainly not in their courtrooms. History will paint me as a villain, a traitor, a lunatic with a pistol and a broken leg. But the truth was always more complex. The man I shot wasn't just a president. He was a symbol of everything I believed was destroying the world I knew. He was a tyrant in disguise, charming the masses while tightening the noose around liberty. My name was John Wilkes Booth, and I did what I believed had to be done. The world knew me first as an actor, born into a family of applause and tragedy. My father, Junius Brutus Booth, was a titan of the stage and a tempest of a man. My brothers, Edwin and Junius Jr., were stars in their own right, beloved in the North and South alike. But I was different. I didn't want the spotlight just for fame. I wanted to move people, to make them feel. And more than anything, I wanted to serve a cause greater than curtain calls. By the time the war tore this country in two, I had already chosen my side. The Confederacy wasn't just a political preference. It was a way of life, a belief in honor, sovereignty, and the sanctity of statehood. When Lincoln was elected, I watched with rising dread as the tide shifted. His words were honey, but I could taste the iron beneath. He promised union, but brought war. He claimed freedom, but delivered destruction. The South was burning, and with it, every tradition I held dear. Cities leveled, families shattered, states humiliated. And Lincoln, with that ever-serene expression, sat in his White House like a Roman emperor, watching the gladiators bleed. I didn't start as a killer. I started as a man with hope. I gave speeches in secret, smuggled messages across borders, even considered kidnapping Lincoln and holding him ransom for the Confederacy. But as the war neared its end, desperation turned hope into hatred. The Union had won, Richmond had fallen, and the president, that tall, ghostly figure with the haunted eyes, was planning a speech about giving freed slaves the vote. That was the final straw. I wasn't alone. My co-conspirators, Lewis Powell, David Harold, George Atzerodt, were men of varying conviction, but they all agreed on one thing: Lincoln had to be silenced, permanently. We met in smoky backrooms, drawing plans on stained napkins and whispers. But no one believed I would truly go through with it. They knew I was passionate, theatrical, but murder, that was a different stage altogether. Then came April 14th, 1865. The day had an eerie calm, like the silence before a storm. I woke early, pacing the floor of my boarding house in Washington. My pocket watch ticked like a funeral drum. Ford's Theatre was bustling that evening, preparing for a comedy called Our American Cousin. Lincoln would be there. It was already known. He wanted to celebrate the Union victory with laughter, with his wife at his side. He was vulnerable, relaxed, open. I waited until dusk fell, until the city's gaslights flickered like candles at a wake. I walked the familiar path to the theatre, not as an intruder, but as a friend of the cast, a beloved actor known to all. No one stopped me. Why would they? I was Booth, handsome, charming, the darling of the stage. They didn't see the revolver hidden beneath my coat. They didn't notice the dagger tucked into my boot. I knew the lines of the play. I knew when the audience would laugh the loudest, that thunderous burst that would mask the sound of a gunshot. I climbed the stairs to the president's private box with the ease of a man going home. In the haze of gunpowder and stunned gasps, I saw the impossible. Abraham Lincoln slumped forward in his chair, his body limp, his smile gone. His wife screamed, a horrible, sharp cry, and Major Henry Rathbone lunged toward me, his eyes wide with horror. I didn't hesitate. I turned, drew my knife, and slashed. I felt the blade tear into his arm, warm blood coating my fingers. He stumbled, howling in pain, and I leapt for the railing. This was the moment I had prepared for. This was my exit. I hurled myself over the edge of the box, meant to land gracefully on the stage. Like Caesar's ghost returned to avenge a fallen republic. But fate had other plans. My boot caught the decorative flag draped across the balcony. I twisted in mid-air, came down hard. I felt the snap in my leg as bone cracked. Agony shot through me, but I pushed through. I rose. I stood tall. The audience gasped, some still believing this was part of the show. I raised my dagger, bloodied and righteous, and bellowed the words that had burned in my soul for weeks. Sic semper tyrannis, thus always to tyrants. I fled across the river into Maryland, hiding in woods and barns, aided by Southern sympathizers who still clung to the dream of Dixie. My name was whispered like fire. Some called me a hero, others cursed my soul, but none could ignore me. For that brief, burning moment, I had reshaped the course of history with a single lead ball. And yet, even as I rose through the darkness, I felt a strange hollowness settling in. Killing a man is not like on the stage. There is no applause, no curtain call, just silence and consequence. I had struck a blow, yes, but the war was already over. Richmond had fallen. Lee had surrendered. Lincoln was already planning reconstruction. Would my act truly awaken the South? Would the Union unravel? Doubt crept in, like rot. For 12 days I ran. My legs swelled, feverish and blackened, reeking of infection. I passed through swamps, forests, and small farmhouses. Always a step ahead, always looking over my shoulder. I wrote feverishly in a diary, just in case I didn't make it. I wanted the world to know my truth, not the one they'd print in northern papers. But on April 26th, they caught up to me. I was holed up in a tobacco barn near Port Royal, Virginia, with David Harold by my side. Union troops surrounded us, dozens of blue coats, torches in hand, rifles ready. I refused to surrender. Harold did, coward. They set the barn on fire. Flames licked the sky. Smoke stung my eyes. I staggered, pistol in hand, ready to sell my life dearly. But then came a crack. Not of my gun, but of a soldier's. A single bullet pierced my neck. I fell, paralyzed, mute, my last moments slipping away as the roof collapsed above me. They dragged me out, my body limp, blood pooling around my collar. I couldn't speak. I could barely breathe. A soldier leaned down and whispered, "You did it for nothing." And I wanted to scream. Not from pain, but from rage. No, I had done it for something. For everything. For a cause. For the South. For revenge. And yet, all I could do was die. I lay on that hard porch for hours, drifting in and out of consciousness. The sun was rising. The war was over. And so was I. They say I whispered something before I died. Maybe I did. Maybe I didn't. I remember trying. My thoughts were a blur of fire, fear, and fading pride. I wanted to say something lasting, something that would burn through the ages, like the shot I fired at Ford's Theatre. Instead, I died a slow death, betrayed by my own collapsing body and forgotten ideals. But let me go back. You think this was just about one man? About Abraham Lincoln? No, that was the final act. The stage had been built long before I ever stepped foot on it. My hatred, my fury, it had roots. Roots in my southern pride, my theatrical blood, my bitter contempt for a government I believed was crushing freedom in the name of unity. Lincoln wasn't just a president to me. He was the destroyer of the South, a tyrant cloaked in civility. A man who spoke sweetly of liberty, while sending thousands of young men to die in muddy fields, destroying everything my people held sacred. And when he smiled, when he dared to speak of healing the nation, it was a dagger in my chest. What healing? The South bled out, while the North planned its victory parade. I was raised in a family of performers, yes, but we were also believers in greatness. My father, Junius Brutus Booth, was a legend. My brothers Edwin and Junius Jr. were respected across the nation, but I was the firebrand, the rebel, the youngest with something to prove, and I did prove it. First in theatre, then in history. You must understand, my plan didn't begin with murder. Initially, I wanted to kidnap Lincoln, hold him hostage, forced the North to exchange him for Confederate prisoners. I had men, I had maps, I had timing, but Lincoln changed his schedule too often. He slipped through my fingers like a ghost. So when Richmond fell and Lee surrendered, I realized something. Kidnapping wasn't enough. The war was done. There would be no trades, no negotiations, just punishment. That's when the thought crystallized. Strike the head of the snake. Killing Lincoln wasn't just vengeance. It was resurrection. In my eyes, by assassinating him, I'd shake the very soul of the Union. I'd stop the jubilant cheers. I'd remind the North that the South still had fire in its belly. And I didn't want to stop with Lincoln. No. This was to be a full-blown conspiracy. 3 assassins, 3 targets. Myself for Lincoln. George Atzerodt for Vice President Andrew Johnson. Lewis Powell for Secretary of State William Seward. A coordinated strike to be carried out the same night, at the same hour. Cut the head off the snake. Cripple the government. We almost succeeded. Atzerodt lost his nerve. Powell managed to stab Seward brutally in his bed. But the man survived, barely. And me, I fulfilled my mission. I struck Lincoln down, while he laughed at a comedy. His blood on my hands felt like justice. But justice is never clean. The papers called us monsters. But I was called something more, something colder, something lonelier. The last Confederate. They said I acted alone. That I was delusional. That I mistook fantasy for cause. But I remember the cheers I received in Maryland taverns. The way some Southern men shook my hand like I was a knight. The way even Northern soldiers whispered about me with a touch of awe. They won't tell you that in the textbooks. They want to simplify it. Booth, madman and traitor. But I was never mad. I was clear-eyed, passionate, willing to risk everything for a belief. Was it the right belief? History can decide that. I was hunted, broken and silenced. But even now, my name still hangs in the air like a spectre. Some spit when they say it. Some whisper it in secret. But they all remember it. We rode through the backwoods like hunted animals. Harold and I, every snap of a branch felt like a gun cocking. Every rustle in the leaves made me want to draw my revolver. My leg throbbed with the memory of the jump, 12 feet from Lincoln's box to the stage. I told the world I shouted Sic Semper Tyrannis, thus always to tyrants. But the truth is ... I'm not sure the crowd even heard me. Their laughter died instantly. Screams filled the air. And I limped through a panicked, rising chaos. Outside, I had a horse waiting. We galloped into the night. The plan was to vanish into the shadows of southern Maryland, hide with sympathizers, then cross the Potomac River and make it to Virginia, where Confederate hearts still beat. But the roads were crawling with soldiers. We stopped at Dr. Mudd's house. He tended to my broken leg without asking too many questions. I told him I fell from a horse. He nodded. He must have known. Word was already spreading. Lincoln was dead, and I was America's most wanted man. We moved mostly at night, cold, damp, and exhausted. I leaned on Harold more than I care to admit. He was younger, eager, but no killer. He followed me out of loyalty, fear, and maybe a shared belief in the Confederacy. But I saw it in his eyes. He wasn't prepared for what we had unleashed. We were no longer rebels. We were marked men. What shocked me most wasn't the pursuit. It was the betrayal. Every house I once thought a sanctuary, every family I once drank with, now looked through cracks in their shutters and whispered prayers not to be associated with me. The South I killed for turned its face away. They feared the Union's wrath more than they revered my mission. In some ways, I understood, but it didn't make the rejection hurt less. We crossed swamps, slept in tobacco sheds, and followed deer trails instead of roads. My legs swelled so badly, I could barely ride. I started using a branch as a crutch. Pain blurred my vision. Fever danced in my skull. By the time we reached the Garrett farm in Virginia, I was half a ghost. The Garretts let us hide in their barn. They fed us, gave us water, but then, they got nervous. Soldiers were drawing closer. I overheard them whispering to a Union patrol. I saw it in their shifty eyes. The betrayal was complete. On April 26th, just 12 days after I pulled the trigger, Federal troops surrounded the barn. We were trapped. David Harold surrendered. I did not. I told them I would not be taken alive. I shouted that I still had my arms, my courage, and my cause. I screamed that I died a Southern man, that I would not crawl from the flames like a coward. Then they set the barn on fire. The heat rose like judgment. Smoke curled around the rafters. My breath turned to coughing. I remember lifting my revolver, but before I could decide whether to use it on myself or on the troops, there was a shot. A single bullet, fired by Sergeant Boston Corbett through a crack in the barn wall. It shattered my neck. I dropped to the floor, paralyzed, the fire crackling around me. My limbs were dead, my thoughts were not. I felt myself slipping into silence. I couldn't scream. I couldn't even swallow. They dragged me out into the night air, my body limp, my mission in ruins. That is where I lay, the last of the old Confederacy, bleeding out beneath a rising dawn. And I thought, this is not how heroes die. They say I died in Garrett's barn. They say my spine shattered and my body went limp, and that I stared into nothing until the last breath crawled out of me like smoke. They say justice was served, that I paid for what I did, and the country could begin to heal. But what they don't say, what they won't say, is what I saw as I slipped away. I saw faces, not just Lincoln's, but all the men who had sat in rooms with power they never earned. All the men who had laughed at Southern pride, who treated honor like a relic, and spoke of freedom, while shackling their enemies with politics. I saw the price of my beliefs, not just in my blood, but in the eyes of those who once agreed with me and now turned away. I realized, in that final flickering of my mind, that I had become not a martyr, but a monster, and yet, even then, I couldn't bring myself to regret it, because regret would mean admitting I was wrong. And wrong men don't carve themselves into history. They forget me now, or worse, twist me into a symbol I never claimed to be. To some, I'm a Confederate ghost. To others, a failed actor with delusions of grandeur. But I was never delusional. I knew what I was doing. I knew what I would become. What I didn't count on ... was how fast it would all disappear. They buried me in darkness. No monument, no ceremony. The government feared I would become a shrine to traitors if they let me rest in the open. My family begged for my body. They denied them. I was hidden like a shameful secret, a stain they scrubbed from the ledger of war. But I still left my mark. Within days, the nation transformed. Federal troops flooded the South. Thousands were arrested in connection with the conspiracy. Most had nothing to do with it, but the machine needed scapegoats. Justice needed blood. Mary saw it. She was hanged. The first woman executed by the US government. They said she helped us, gave us shelter. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't, but the noose didn't care. It swung all the same. My co-conspirators, Powell, Atzerodt, Harold, they met the same end, swung from the gallows. I wasn't there to see it, but I felt it, like echoes of my own death, rippling out across the country. And the man I killed, Abraham Lincoln, became immortal. They called him a martyr, a saint, a second father of the Republic. His face was etched into stone, his speeches recited by children, his dream of unity embraced by those who once spat on it. In killing him, I made him eternal. Is that not the cruelest twist of all? As years passed, the South never truly rose again. The war had already broken its bones. My bullet only sealed the coffin. Reconstruction came like a storm. Freedmen voted. Black men walked streets once barred to them. The old world I believed in cracked, bled, and vanished. I often wonder if I had failed, if my gun had jammed, if Lincoln had ducked, what would have changed? Would the country still have splintered in different ways? Would the man I hated have gone on to forgive the South, as he said he would? Or would another war have begun in silence? This time not of muskets and flags, but policies and punishments. I will never know, but what I do know is this: in the end, no one remembers my cause. They remember my act. I am not a rebel hero in the books. I am not a liberator. I am not a savior of the Confederacy. I am the man who shot Abraham Lincoln, and nothing more. That was the bargain I struck with history. That was the truth I had to die with. They called it the shot that changed America. But I, John Wilkes Booth, didn't pull the trigger to change a nation. I pulled it because I believed it was already lost. I thought myself a surgeon, cutting out the rot to save the body. But I was the infection. I see that now. I died with a shattered spine, my body broken. But it was my ideals that truly snapped first. Somewhere in the quiet minutes after the bullet, after the escape, after the barn fire, when the rage faded and the silence came. Because I never planned to live, not really. A man like me doesn't plot the death of a president and expect a peaceful retirement. I didn't long for freedom. I longed for significance, for the history books, for a legacy, and now I have one, but it's not what I thought it would be. My name is a curse now. Parents don't name their children after me. Playwrights don't honor my performances. I was once praised for my presence on stage, commanding, charismatic. Now, I'm only remembered for the last performance, the one where I didn't take a bow. My grave lies unmarked, visited only by those curious or contemptuous. My family, once famous in the theatre, now remembered only for the shame dragged into their legacy. But the most painful thing, my death didn't stop anything. The war was already over, the South already lost. All I did was harden the peace into punishment. The very thing I feared Lincoln might forgive, others would not. My bullet ensured that Reconstruction became vengeance. I became the reason to justify harsher terms, stricter laws, deeper divides. I didn't save the Confederacy. I helped bury it, and what of the others, my fellow conspirators? Those brave or foolish enough to join me, they are dust now, buried in obscurity or vilified forever. Harold, my companion through the swamps and shadows, was hanged like a criminal. Powell, the brute who attacked Secretary Seward, died beside him. Atzerodt, the man who lost his nerve and spared the vice president, still paid with his life. Mary Sorrent, the boarding house owner, pleaded her innocence until the rope took her final breath. Do I believe they deserved it? At the time, yes. Now, I only wonder if they, too, realized too late that we were all just pawns in a game already lost. The Confederacy died on battlefields. We were only its echo. History judges us through the lens of survival. They canonized Lincoln, made him the great emancipator, plastered his face on mountains and currency. His Gettysburg words became scripture. His murder made him immortal, and me, the footnote, the cautionary tale, the deranged actor, the misguided assassin, the man who shot hope in the back of the head and fled into myth. I wanted to ignite rebellion. Instead, I hardened unity. I wanted to destroy a tyrant. Instead, I created a martyr. If irony is the final revenge of the righteous, then I have been served, and now I speak only in shadows. No voice, no followers, no redemption arc. Just the truth I carry like a stone in the gut. That the man I hated was not the devil I painted. That the South I loved did not love me back. That history does not remember the motives, only the scars. So if you walk past Ford's Theatre one night and feel a chill in your spine, perhaps that's me. Not in flesh or spirit, but in warning. Because I, John Wilkes Booth, thought myself the author of a new chapter in American history. But in the end, I was just a closing sentence. If this story gripped you, shocked you, or made you think differently about American history, hit that like button and subscribe for more intense stories of betrayal, power, and downfall. We post weekly documentaries that explore the dark corners of history, from emperors and empresses to assassins and revolutions. Got a story you want us to uncover? Send your ideas using the email link in the description.